Hey, amazing people. Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at patterns and plotting points. Now, the key element of this is where we're able to draw a graph in a straight line that can be drawn through points which we've been plotting in the last few lessons. And when we do this, this is what's called a linear graph because it represents a straight line. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to work through an example in order to help us understand the steps that we go through. So for this example here, we've been given the points of -2 and 1, -1 and 0, 0 and 1, 1 and 2, and 2 and 3. What it's being asked us to do here is asking us to plot the points onto a number plane. What I might do is draw up a number plane to get started. Okay, so now that I've got my number plane here, what I want to do is I want to start plotting these points on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this first point here of -2 and -1. So what I want to do is I want to plot this on here. Now, I haven't put the numbers on here yet because sometimes you might need to differ them. But in this case here, I'm not going to differ them at all. So what we're going to do is we start at the origin, which is the center of this graph, and that's always got a 0 there, which represents the point of 0, 0. Now, in addition to that, we're going to put the numbers along the x-axis, which is the one that goes acrossways, and then we're going to put the numbers on the y-axis, which goes up and down. So the numbers on the x-axis here, to the right of it, are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then to the left of that, they're going to be negative of -1, -2, -3, and -4, -5. Now, likewise, we're going to do the same for the y-axis as well. So when we go above the line, this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Then as we go below it, we're going to put negative numbers like this. 3, -4, -5. Okay, so now that we've got the points on there, we can start to plot these points on here. So the first one is -2 and 1. So that -2, the number that comes first, is the x-axis. So I'm going to go until I find that point on the x-axis, and then it says -1. So that means I need to move down 1 from that point, which means we're going to be at this point right here. Okay, so that's the first point I want to plot. The next one I want to plot is -1 and 0. So that means I'm moving on the x-axis, -1, so I'm moving 1 to the left, and then 0 means I'm not moving up or down from there. So that's going to be right there on our number plane. The next one is 0, 1. So this one, the 0 is indicating we're not moving anywhere, and then the number 1 is moving up 1 spot from there. So that's going to be at that point there. Okay, we'll move on. Next one is 1, 2. So that means I'm moving to the right 1 point, and then 2 means from that point I move up 2 more. So we're going to go across 1, up 2, and there. So hopefully you can start to see the pattern of these lines forming a straight line. And lastly, we've got the point 2 and 3. What this means is I'm going to come across 2 and up 3, and I can put that line there. Now, with all these points on the number plane, what I need to then do next for this is it's asking me to draw a straight line passing through all of the points. So using a ruler, what I want to do is just draw a nice straight line for all the points. I can go past the points. I don't need to just restrict myself to there. So as you can see, I've gone past them. I just want to put some arrow ends on the end as well to indicate that this line can continue on in both directions. So with that there, I've now completed part A and I've completed part B. So from that, what we need to do is we need to put this into a table of values. So I've got a table of values here, which I've started to fill in, and I've got X and Y put on this. And what we want to do is we want to take the coordinates we've got up here, and we want to put them down into this table now. So as we go about that, what we're going to do, I'm going to focus on just the X values first. So that means the first number in each of these. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to list these as they are straight into this table. Okay, now that I've put those values in there, the next ones I want to focus on is the Y values. And this is going to be the matching ones to them in those values. So that's the second one in each of these coordinates up here. So they are now going to be put into this table. Okay, now with the table of values filled in, and I've put all of those coordinates into there, I've got my table of values. Now this is really, really useful for when we get to the next step, which is part D. So in part D, what we're being asked here to do is write down the rule linking the X and the Y values. So because they form this straight line, which we can see in the graph, that tells us there's some sort of rule here linking them together. So there's some pattern, some rule, which is making that graph happen here. So what we want to do is, first of all, we can look at the X values, and if we do that, we can see they're just going up by ones, which is good to know, but doesn't really help us in this step here. So then the next thing I want to do is I want us to go and look at the Y values, because the Y values can be often far more helpful here. So as we look at them, we're going from -1 up to 0. And we can see here that that means we are adding 1 to it. So let's keep going. Let's look at 0 to 1. And what's happening here is, again, we're adding 1 to it. We go from 1 to 2. Do we have the same pattern? Yes, we do. We're adding 1. Then if we go from 2 to 3, we have that same pattern again. And yes, we do. Now, what this pattern is telling me is there's an increase which is occurring every single time. And so what we can say is happening here is that we've got the values and they're kind of increasing one at a time. So we're going to start to form our rule. In this case, what I want to do is I want us to write y is equal to x. And if we do here, what we can do, we can put a number 1 in front, which is representing these ones here, which we have here. Now, the thing is, often in algebra, we don't include a number in front of x. So even though we've got 1x here, we don't necessarily have to. We can just leave this as an x by itself. Now, the next step is I want to see if this works. So as we test this here, let's look at particularly this point here. It's a nice, easy point to use. So we're going to use this x value and this y value. Now, if I substitute these points in, those 2 points are equal to one another, which is what I've got in my rule at the moment. So instead, I want to know how I'm getting from an x value to a y value. Now, that y value is 1 point more than the x value, isn't it? So as a result, I'm going to create adjustment to my rule here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that extra 1, which is in place there. So now if I was to test that point, we'll find that when I substitute in these values, so 0 for x and add 1 to it, that gets me to 1. So that's a tick for that one there. If I was to test another of these points, I should get the same thing happening again. So for this one here, if I point 0.2 in for the x, that gives me a 2 plus 1, that's 3, and that works for that those coordinates there as well. So I can see that it works, and I've got my pattern here. What we would say is the rule linking x and y values, it's going to be y equals x plus 1.